And so a big welcome to Good Attention Show, the gorgeous paradigm shifter, Teal Swan. Yay, here she is. How are you?
I'm doing good today. How about you?
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. You didn't know this. So in relationships, let me ask you a question. Is there anything like in your childhood experiences that you don't want to experience or want to have to process through, or are you tired of self-help work at all? Because I get to the point where I'm tired of self-help work. I'm like, Frida, just let it be and I'll deal with
Do you
the
just ever want to sit at home and watch Netflix and binge?
It's like you assume that I don't.
Yeah.
Well, well, here's the thing. I feel like if any of us who have been in this field long enough are still perpetuating the idea that we don't have those shadow moments, we're kind of blowing smoke up everybody else's butt. Because the
Right.
reality is that this is hard work. This is not easy work. Facing yourself is really difficult. And so
Yeah.
you'd be hard pressed to find a single person that doesn't take a self-help book and throw it across the room, or have those days where they're like, why did I ever open Pandora's box? This is the worst thing that ever happened to me. So yeah, I have those days. I have those days a lot. I vacillate back and forth between loving this and hating it, feeling like this is the best decision to be in this business and this is the worst business on earth. And I do have those days where I'm like, I can't think deeply for one more second. I'm going to go watch White Chicks, like that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, that's good because you're human, and that's just that's what we're all about. And people think when you kind of have these extra sensory human abilities, they think that you live life maybe a little bit differently than the average person.
I
So.
do. I do and I don't. I mean, that's the interesting part for anybody that comes and lives with me. It's like there are
Yeah.
aspects of my life that are way, way different than how the average person lives, and other aspects that are incredibly similar. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. Now, one thing I really love about how you processed everything, and one of your videos, I can't remember which one it was, so many of them, which is great, is you truly take the victim, not playing the victim role, to the the complete understanding of that. Everything you say, you talked about that you experienced, what you went through from that traumatic, horrible situation you were in for all those years. You basically say that you created it. You created that for that experience. And my understanding, and I love your concept of the 2 points. The higher self is part of the law of attraction, as well as I call it three-dimensional self. I think you call it a temporal self, right?
Yeah.
And I love the fact that, because even though this temporal self, or this three-dimensional self, is the temporal self is we're I don't know if we understand the law of attraction, or if we are misunderstanding it, or it's just a lot of people get it and they think, oh, I can't experience any negative experiences. I don't want any negative realities. Like this one that I was listening to on her show she was having, and she was talking about, don't associate yourself with people who have that scarcity mindset of money attitude. So stay away from those type of people. And I think it's disservice to take it to that degree. It's like it's been co-opted. So what's your thoughts on that? The positive based denial thinking is what you call it, I think.
Oh my God, it's like my number one enemy. If you're going to say that I have one in this business, it's that methodology of thinking. Anything that you avoid, you're going to attract more of into your life. So essentially, I'm not an advocate of avoiding anything. That's why I feel like part of the most important way of getting out of victim mentality is to actually acknowledge that there is an aspect of you that's victimized. To take this other aspect of you, let's call it the higher self, that wasn't tainted or touched or tarnished or injured by what happened, and take that aspect and come in underneath supporting the aspect of you that feels like a victim.
Yeah.
It's really, really critical. We can't just be saying, I mean, see, like the funny part is saying I don't believe in victim mentality is yet another form of avoidance.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but how do you distinguish between where you're attracting negative, because you have to deal with the subconscious beliefs here, the shadow work that you talk
Yep.
about, and that's 30,000 times more powerful than our conscious mind, like you and I are talking on. I mean, that's a freaking monster. I mean, how do you balance? How do you know you're really dealing with the denial, or you're really, because if you're tracking a lot of negative experiences, it could be your higher self is setting you up so you can learn contrast and develop, but if you're trying to live a life without suffering, or you're trying to engage that as much as you can, there's times when you can't, and there's times when you can. So what type of state of being would you consider being a healthy perspective to live in on a day-to-day, dealing with that type of understanding?
Well, I feel like a healthy space to live in is a commitment to awareness. But the problem is that to commit to awareness, you've got to stop committing 100% to joy. Now that sounds interesting because I'm basically going to contradict myself in the future based off of where some people are vibrationally. But there are some people who are ready for the beginning phase of spiritual practice. In the beginning phase of spiritual practice, we learn to follow joy. We start to realize we have power over our reality, and that becomes our quest. But quite soon, we notice that even that is done out of a space of resistance towards what is unwanted, and the movement becomes painful. The human race is constantly moving away from things towards other things. The moment in which that movement becomes painful, you realize that you're constantly running. Then we have to come to a space where what we're capable of doing is being completely present. And awareness is part of that complete presence. But being completely present means that we don't get to selectively be with what's wonderful and not with something that is painful. We have to be basically committing to being with both. We have judged anything that is negative, that feels negative, as bad. And so we lack the capacity to be completely unconditionally present with it. But what you'll notice is that the beauty of your life, and beauty, I'm going to say, is much different than just happiness. But beauty will unfold as a result of being capable of being present with both negative and positive aspects of this universe.
Well, beautifully stated. And I just, to me, I always have that challenge because when am I experiencing something my higher self am I supposed to experience? And then consciously, when am I in charge of what am I experiencing? It's almost like this co-creation, and people think co-creations with like me, Sandra, you, we're co-creating and we're interacting with each other on a collective conscious level. But then we also have to add in our higher self creating, right, with the law of attraction, then our, I don't want to say lower self, but our temporal self, as she says, our three-dimensional self in this world, this made-up world that we're experiencing. And so you don't take when people says, well, you're here in this three-dimensional world to experience joy and fun and enjoy life. You don't take that to be as true because I guess the only thing I would say probably because you don't is because suffering is perceptual.
Well, I actually do and I don't, because that truth that
Okay.
you just stated, that we are here on the planet to experience happiness, is a universal truth.
Okay.
Because life itself was created for the sake of expansion.
Right.
Expansion is happening by virtue of you following your emotional guidance system in the direction of happiness. So yes, life was created for that fact, but what happens when you become aware of that is you suddenly step outside the matrix that was created by the universe itself. The matrix being, follow your joy. Once you stop doing that, you're now outside of the realm of expansion, and expansion becomes about much more than that. It becomes about awareness in general. So that means being with both happiness and unhappiness. That means becoming aware of both. That means not just being the rat in the cage that follows your happiness for the sake of the universe finding expansion. I mean, we're talking about another level of godhood. So the major issue of being in my kind of position as a spiritual teacher is that I get to express to you truths which seem contradictory only because they exist on different dimensional levels of this universe. You are a physical being, that is not a lie in the third dimension, but it is a lie in the 11th dimension. So what we've got to stop doing is looking for this one absolute truth that applies to all dimensions. You're never going to find it. So we have to develop the capacity for and consciousness. It's the ability to embrace opposing truths and to learn how to work them together. So this is what we find with that what you were saying before. How do I know what's what and what I should be doing at this present moment? We have to make it really as simple as we are in a state of awareness, we are in a state of being, and from that state you will be inspired towards action. It's not like somebody who's in a state of presence will never make an action, will never actually put forth energy to create the life that they want. It's not like they're just going to accept everything that is. That defies the universe as well. So it's more about creating this fusion, and you're never going to do it by intellectually trying to find balance. The fusion is
Mhm.
essentially be as present as you can, and if you feel inspired towards action, take it. But when you take it from that aspect of awareness, that place of I have been present with this, so I'm not escaping from it, your inspired action will have 30 times the gravity that it normally would. for the average human.
You know, and that's interesting that you talk about inspired action, because that's what I've been on a kick lately, because I've been really getting more involved with what's going on around the world. And like when you're saying, like, for people to experience, like, let's take autism for a second. You know, this higher self is setting up this child to go through a autistic experience this lifetime, and
Yeah.
to learn suffering, or if whatever suffering, to have this experience for whatever reason. But at the same time, in a three-dimensional world, we're aware of that we have these, you know, vaccine companies that, and you know, this Agenda 21 and this deliberate poisoning of vaccines, and what's going on with all these players. Where as parents, you know, and you got to deal with the guilt of the parent who injects their child and realize that they didn't have to have this life if I didn't make that decision, you know. So how do you reconcile that? Reconcile that this is the kid's choice to have this experience, and this is, you know, I could have prevented this, or I could stop this by exposing the CDC and what they're doing. I mean, how do you reconcile that in reference to? I could just say, hey, this is everybody's experiences. Let them do it. I don't need to get involved. I don't need to be inspired action on anything, you know.
Yeah, and that's a massive cop-out. That's nothing more than avoidance. But there is not a contradiction. This is what I want to express to people. There is no contradiction actually between those two states that you just exposed. Essentially, this is part of the reason that I feel like I came down to this. Without beings who are intentionally coming down into abusive experiences, the dynamics of abuse are not exposed. The dynamic of intimacy is not exposed. The dynamic of how to have healthy relationships is not exposed. This type of stuff is not possible without the opposition. Does that mean that the human race should continue to create opposition for the sake of expansion? No, because the minute that we become aware of what we would rather have instead, there is no need for the contrast. Now, the problem with the human race is that regardless of the fact that we become aware of what we actually want, we seldom go in the direction of it. We continue to focus towards what we don't want. It's unnecessary. We are at a tipping point in the human race. It is no longer a luxury to awaken. That's just, I mean, in a nutshell, I'm just going to put it that way. Awakening is no longer a luxury. It is an absolute necessity of our existence on this planet. But what we need to do once we become aware of, yes, I chose into this life that may have been difficult, what does that inspire me towards? And then go in the direction of that 100%.
And I think a lot of people who are awakening, I think where this metaphysical, new age type thought, you know, perhaps have been co-opted to a degree where, just like with major religions, you know, they're waiting for some person to come by and save everybody rather than getting off their butt and going out there and taking inspired action, you know. But same thing, it's like the master and slave mentality. Same thing with these new agers. Oh, I just have to think positive thoughts and everything will be fine. I don't have to actually go out and, you know, go against the freaking Department of Defense, you know, worry about CIA operatives coming out and catching you, whatever, you know. I mean, so it's like, you know, so there has to, like, but if everybody was awakening to that, if everybody was just taking inspired action, you know, they're like the wizard behind the, you know, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain there. You know, you expose them and they just fall apart. So to me, inspired action is critical, but it seems like both ends, you know, your religious end and in your new age end, have been co-opted to the point where they don't take inspired action. But like you just said, this is critical time. This is the Super Bowl. All right, we're in the Super Bowl now. Hello, hey, this is the game, the big game. Here we are, final hour. You know, and like people like yourself, I believe in past lives. I know you do. I know Sandra does. It's like we chose to be here for this Super Bowl game. You know, it's scary, it's exciting, it's everything on what you could ever imagine. But we got to take action. You know, and everyone takes action in their own way. But some people who aren't taking action yet, what do you have to say to them? What's your advice for them?
My advice for people that aren't taking action?
Yeah.
I don't have much advice for them because the reality is that they are where they are. So what I'm going to be doing, because that's what I have control over, is to inspire people to embrace emotion. The reason that somebody is not taking action out of fear is because they do not have the capacity to hold space for fear. And that happens when we grow up in a society that doesn't allow us to feel emotion. Emotion is rejected, disowned, denied, and means essentially isolation or punishment. So it's no joke that the minute we feel those feelings as adults, we try to escape them in every way we possibly can. So how do we reverse this? We become capable of feeling. And once we're capable of feeling, we see it doesn't destroy us. We can actually take action, even if it scares us. But we're never going to be able to convince the world to take action, even though it scares the hell out of them. But what we can do, like right now today, is to at least hold space for other people's emotions, to show them that they're not immediately going to lose somebody the minute that they feel a certain feeling. to demonstrate, even by virtue of example, what it means to be able to hold space for your fear and move forward anyways. People assume that people in my position who are public, who have tons of hate groups dedicated towards them, don't even feel fear when they step up on stage. No, it absolutely is a reality of most of our existence, but we have learned how to hold those emotions and get on stage anyway, with them, not fighting against them. So this is the phase of emotional awakening as far as I'm concerned. And as far as I'm concerned, that's also the best thing we can do for this planet.
Well, I mean, beautifully stated. And so basically being the leader, being the example out there of what you're doing, people could see your strength in you and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I could do that too.
Yes,
You know,
but
maybe,
let's
maybe
make it more close to home. Let's say that you're dealing with somebody who is not really leaving their relationship, even though they're really in a miserable situation. And they're like, I'm just too scared. It's just too scary to get out of this little rut. The best thing that we could do isn't to walk in there and be like, oh, you just need to do it right now, right? That's actually us becoming the abuser towards their emotional state. What we
right.
can do instead is to be coming in with this embracing kind of attitude. We are basically demonstrating to them what it looks like to hold space for emotion by saying, I understand the fact that it is scary as hell. And it doesn't, like, you don't have to feel different. There's no reason for you to feel differently than this. Fear is an accurate way to feel in this circumstance. See, now, you see what just happened to you when I said that? Did you feel there
Yeah.
was a softening around the fear? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
even put
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
in the person's shoes?
Yeah. Sure
That
did. Yeah.
softening is, in fact, the higher self opening up so that that afraid aspect of the person can settle into it. Now then, do you feel how closer that person may be to taking action that they're afraid of?
Yeah.
Because you're not being a bull in a china shop.
Yeah.
Exactly. You cannot be a bull in a china shop with emotions, and this is what we don't understand.
Well, speaking of emotions, your mother, and you talked also about, the physical and the sexual abuse and the emotional abuse. It seems like the emotional abuse gets a pass. It just doesn't get a lot of attention because it's because the physical, sexual, so in your face. It's so vivid there. But to me, it's like the paper death by 1,000 paper cuts. I mean, yeah, it's like the emotional abuse goes on and on and on, and it gets no tell. And it seems like emotional abuse is one of your uh, point that you talk about a lot is what do you do? Because we really don't have an understanding on a collective societal level of how damaging emotional abuse really is. I mean, we really kind of get a second look sometimes. It hardly ever does. So how do you, in your issues that you growing up with what out of the three, which has you feel made you learn contrast and through suffering the most?
Well, that is what I really need people to listen to me about. If you've got somebody
Right.
who went through ritual cult abuse, which
Yeah.
is the worst that you can experience, and I'm telling you that emotional abuse is worse than any other form of abuse, people need to start listening to that. That's why when somebody steps up on stage with me and they say something like, yeah, my parents just made me feel like I didn't belong, a person in my position could be like, oh yeah, try getting raped several times when you're 6 years old. No, hell no, I'm not going to say that. Why? Because it is absolutely comparable abuse. It
Yeah.
destroys your long-term potential is what it does. So it is no joke, and we need to end it, like, immediately. And I cannot tell you the amount of emotional abuse we perpetuate on each other. I watch it every single day. In a normal relationship, a normal relationship is about emotional abuse. It's about control dynamics. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So we need to learn how to have relationships.
Amen to that. Either that or stay away from them. That's my take these days.
Oh,
No, I'm just
no,
kidding.
no.
I'm kidding. I love
Well,
everybody.
it's interesting. I had a life coach once tell me that control really is like a lack of faith, and not necessarily religious faith, and that's not what I'm talking about.
Your spiritual faith in
lack of
yourself.
into
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and this trying to control the other person or control the situation is a lack in faith that it will
Yeah.
come to a higher being or self or situation.
Absolutely. Do you feel, Teal? Do you feel that? Can you see with your extrasensory skill sets? I love saying that, extrasensory. It's my new favorite word of the day. Can you, like, when you see emotional abuse going on, whether it's with a child or whether it's adults, relationships, whatever, can you visually or through your five senses experience in other ways? Like changes of colors, they go from blue to red.
He's on. Do you see the aura?
Oh, I don't know. Whatever
Yeah.
senses that you may pick up on, since you have all the clairs.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
she's
see
frozen.
auras. I see all of these things. Yes.
Okay, but when like say when an emotional abusive situation is going on, does things change for you, or you just sense an energy change,
Oh yeah.
or can you
Well, hell,
see
yeah.
can you
No,
see
no.
stuff?
It's visual. It's auditory. It's all of it. That's what most people don't know about the auric field. The auric field has patterns. It has sounds. So even when I step into somebody's energy field, I can tell whether they're off pitch. And emotional abuse creates a very specific pitch in a person's auric field, especially within the aspect of their auric field which relates to the emotional body.
Okay, and so does that like overload stimuli overload for you? Because to me, I don't know how
God,
unless
my
you.
life is a nightmare. I mean, like in reality, I would love to paint a pretty picture and be like, oh my God, it's so wonderful. Develop all your extrasensory abilities. And I feel like, people like me are basically going to lead the new earth because
Yeah.
honestly, what I can live with is what's healthy for all people. And what I can't live with is unhealthy for all people. So if you just live the way an extrasensory lives, your life is going to be amazing. Society would be amazing. But living in this reality currently as an extrasensory, it's like a
It's
toy
very
with death
motivating.
is what it's like.
Yeah.
Mm.
You just painted a really clear picture for me on that because I never really understood that. And to me, I can see now why people such as yourself are extremely motivated for changing this freaking planet, you know?
Mm.
It's for self-survival in a way. But to me like Daniel Brinkley was on the show. I don't know if you know Daniel Brinkley. He wrote the book Saved by the Light. He was struck by light and had one of the long near-death experiences. Anyway, he cannot take any pain medications or drink much alcohol at all. Otherwise, it takes away from his uh, extrasensory skills. Tell him the internet problem. You ever
It
tell
could be on her end.
Yeah, maybe, but it's fine. And so he was saying is that he cannot have any uh, type of relationship when it comes to. There you are. You there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm there. Yep.
Any type of relationship when it comes, or not relationship, but he can't take any pills because he'll lose his extrasensory skills. But he's in a pain because his lightning struck his back. He's in pain on a scale of 0 to 10, and 10 all the time. He's in pain all the time, and he's learned to have to deal with that pain through meditation, through holistic means. Otherwise, he loses that skill set. So it's almost like you guys are in sync with each other in a way, but you're not in that level
Oh
of,
yeah.
of physical pain, but you're in emotional pain,
No, I'm in both. It's actually very, very painful.
physical pain.
Yeah, physically as well. It's physically and emotionally painful. It is super painful. It's like taking a jellyfish and exposing it to a tide pool where you're surrounded by rocks that shatter you. That's what it feels like to be extrasensory in this world.
Okay. So, wow. So, like right now, I saw you were taught not to put you in a state of physical pain, but I was wondering if you could describe that because us who are not extrasensorial or sensory in a sense could only go by intellectual understanding what you're experiencing.
Okay, well, so if you can feel your nerve endings right now in your body, I want you to imagine that around all of your nervous system and around your nerve endings is kind of like an oily coating that it kind of buffers you from anything, whether it's an emotional, like say somebody gets angry, they get mad, right? And you've got that oil kind of a buffer. That doesn't exist for those of us who are extrasensory. And so it literally is just like getting zapped from every angle. And so your nervous system feels incredibly raw. If somebody gets mad at me on the road, there is no buffer there. It goes through my system, through every single cell, in through all of my nervous system. And so by the end of the day, just the amount of input that's coming in from all over the place makes it so that it's a state of rawness and it's a state of just being exhausted by it.
That's amazing. You could almost see why you really kind of have to lock yourself up in a place where you are, that type of vibration, that type of frequency energy is not accessible where you are. I mean, you almost have to live a life of a recluse.
I mean, you don't
Well,
have
you'd think so,
to.
but no, that's out of
Yeah.
alignment. What you
That's out of
have to
alignment.
do
Yeah.
is to reverse the energy flow. So instead of you constantly having everything coming in, you become essentially a vessel. So when you do that, when you're in a flow for somebody who's an extrasensory, like you're writing or you're expressing or you're doing art in some way, the pure frequency of these higher dimensional energies will flow through you completely, and then the energy is going out instead of in. That tends to be
Wow.
the very best way to deal with it.
So you're
Wow.
like a funnel.
Yes.
I guess yeah, that's amazing. And I wonder if that's what Danyon does too. I'll have to ask him that question.
But
But
this
that's
is
it.
what we have to understand, though, is that your extrasensories on this planet, your sensitives, your autistic people, all of these
Yeah,
people who we could
yeah,
label sensitive types, right? There is a species that's always your indicator species. We know this in science. So when an environment starts to get out of alignment, oftentimes it's the amphibians that start to be hit first. So you got to watch that teller species. And if they start disappearing, if their numbers start dropping, if they start developing issues, the entire chain is going to have issues. So what we have to start doing is to pay attention as humans to the sensitives, because they're the indicator of where we are headed as a culture, as a species, and what we need to do in terms of change as a species for the health of the totality. Like when you hear
So
people say, oh, you got to just cope with the way the world is, you're headed
right.
for a giant brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
So all these years, I've been trying to align my son with how to live in this type of world, rather than just promoting his
Yep.
extrasensory, the damage being done there. See, I didn't want to think about that sometimes because it's just my God, because the emotional abuse aspect that in relationships, with your kids, with your parents, it's just so prevalent that, and of course I say I don't want to, you have to deal with it now more so than ever, because if we don't, we're really not going to shift, are we,
No,
on that
and this
level?
is the most difficult. I honestly I want to talk to the people of today because I understand how difficult it is for you to look at the world and want to raise children that can cope with this world, and also knowing that we don't really want this world that's out there to begin with. So what
Yeah.
I'm going to call people in on is this idea that we are the generation that has got to be brave enough that we are willing, instead of molding our children to the current reality, to allow them to be entirely what they are, pure expression, so that they then create the society we always wanted to live. And unless we're brave enough to do that, which means not aligning with the public schools, it means not vaccinating, it means a lot of things, we have to be brave enough to do that, then we're not going to see the reality that we want to have created. It is in these children that are being born now that this society is going to be created, the one that we actually want to see.
Because that reminds me, because
Mm.
it's so powerful, and
It's
reminds me.
actually very
It
beautiful.
is. Well, it reminds me that because a lot of people are conditioned, a lot of organized religions are conditioned that, okay, we're ascending to the spiritual self being. And, a lot of people I talk to, and even in the new age, like, I just can't, this is my last lifetime. I'm never coming back again. It's like,
I don't want to forget my keys.
well, probably with that attitude, you'll be back every time. But,
Yeah.
but, or why don't we look at it from a perspective that we're these higher self spiritual beings trying to create a heaven on earth so we could descend into this area here. And if you feel, and to me, if you feel like we're descending spirits into creating an environment where we can descend into, because our spirits, like you, I mean, you're like the Marines. You're the first one out here on the land here, creating a land here, and the rest of the troops and logistics will show up later on. When things are nice and heavenly out here. It's like that. You really are a brave soul, I have to say, Teal, and I admire that the most about you. But but to descend, if you have the concept of descending into this human body here in this spiritual plane that we're living, this three-dimensional world that we're living in, to me, it automatically brings the sense of, oh yeah, I better straighten out, my house. I better straighten out my local government. I better straighten out my, hey, this is like inspired action here, because if I'm not going to take the vaccines, or if we don't start making these decisions on that level, inspired action, interconnected with each other, then we're just going to go. We're going to stay in the matrix and keep continuing. We're never going to shift this paradigm, right?
It's
Exactly.
going to shift regardless, right? Whether
No,
you say
I don't know. I mean,
No,
I
it's
don't think
not. I'm see. This
regardless.
is the thing. It's not going to shift regardless because, and
Yeah, so
this
that's
is
another cop
why.
out, isn't it? Yeah, good. Get it,
Right
girl.
now,
Get
you are
it.
watching the splitting. You are watching the splitting and the polarization within the human race between the people who are choosing to actually go in the direction of the new and the people who are resisting what was, or else completely embracing it. Same exact thing. Now, if it's not for those of us that stand up and do that, what we're headed towards is essentially a huge crisis. Those of you who know
Mm.
about awakening know that the majority of the ways you find your way to awakening, if it's not childhood abuse, it's some cataclysmic event, essentially, that you line up with. And after that, like whacking a tree at 80 miles an hour in your car and being paralyzed after that, you have an awakening. Now, if the
Right.
human race is not going to choose into awakening, they will line up with a cataclysmic event that essentially awakens
Ah.
people. And this is not something which I would love to see happen. I would love for the human race to line up with awakening through a different route than complete cataclysm, but it is not looking like it is going to be the case so far. So
I'll tell you
I,
what. I mean, I hear you, Teal, and I'll tell you, and I'm rolling the dice on everything in my life right now because I have a business but this foundation, what we're doing, and inspired action that we're shifting into, and the Vax bus that's driving around the country trying to wake up people. I have to believe that more people are going to wake up and realize what's going on because these players are showing their hands. And I want to ask a question about that. As they're showing their hands, as they're knocking off docs, they're trying to keep, the Mr. Smiths are trying to keep us in the program, and I see more people waking up every day just on the vaccination aspect, and that could lead to so many other areas. And you realize, wow, we do have a shadow government. Oh, wow, we do have that there's glyphosate in our food and there's actual poison. Wow,
Fluoride
that's
in our
interesting.
water.
Or the fluoride in the water. Get rid of your third eye there.
Yeah.
But so I have to believe people are waking up. And I'll tell you what, whatever soldiers out there the Marines such as yourself are out there leading the way, I think you'll have a lot more people coming. And I think we need to hold that intention too. Because honestly, if we could just shift, like I'm thinking, if we could just shift a few of those, those power brokers, the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, or somehow get them away from this Luciferian mindset, hypnotic state they've been put into, and get into more of just attach themselves back to their, because they have souls like everybody else, attach them back into their source. If we could just shift one or two of those key players, man, you'd have just bam, you'd have that just like at the end of the Matrix when all of a sudden everyone starts blowing up with light. I mean, what a great movie, by the way. I just one of my all-time favorite reality movies.
It's so symbolic.
Go ahead, Teal. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on a rant there.
no, you didn't go. I didn't have anything to say to that.
Oh, okay.
I hope you're right.
I'm gonna put some positive intentions for you that we're making headway here, even though
I think we are making headway, and I mean the reality is that I travel all over the world, and when I do that, I get to meet the most amazing people that are in every single country creating these amazing new modalities of living. But yeah.
Well, what gives you hesitation? What are the indicators that you're seeing now that kind of gives you like, oh God, these freaking people,
Being an extrasensory gives me that. The problem with my life is that I see life path potentials, and the human race is lined up with the cataclysm. So
and the probabilities are getting smaller and smaller every day goes by.
Let's just put it this way. As far as the probabilities, in 2011, we were hitting a tipping point where it was either going to be collective awakening or else us lining up with a huge world event, which caused that awakening for the people that survived it. And at this point, I don't see life path where we avoid it. So at this point, I've been in a really tough position because people in my position tend to be the ones that either lead people into a good positive direction, into the direction of change, or else scare them so bad about what's coming that they just feed into exactly the issue. So I've been walking a tightrope basically for this
It's like a
entire year.
catch 22, isn't it? In a way, at the
It
watch
is a
out
catch
for.
too, because the reality is that we are headed towards a giant world conflict right now, a very, very big one. And we are
Right.
toying in today's world with a conflict that really does not support human life. The kind of weaponry that we are dealing with today is unlike anything we have ever seen in history. And
Oh,
we're dealing with
yeah.
power brokers that do not mind that kind
No.
of impact.
They're
So-
totally disconnected and psychopathic, totally disconnected from source. That they have no. It's like the satanic occult. They have no sense of appreciation for humanity. And I see it every day. And they have such a good matrix tool going on that keeps people plugged in. And I get frustrated too. But I just thank God I can't feel like you. But maybe not. Maybe I should feel like you, and then maybe I'd be even more motivated than I am now to try to make that shift.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I feel like, you have a phase you go through where you realize what everybody's headed towards, where you're like, why am I even here? Why did I choose to come down at this particular time? And you kind of feel
Right.
powerless. But then you realize, and this is what I've been talking about recently, you realize that when we are lining up with this giant world conflict, what this essentially is the universe breaking our rat cage. So we're in a time and phase where so many of us have said, I really want this thing like intentional community, or I really want sustainable living, or I really want fill in the blank with whatever you've wanted.
Yeah.
And yet we don't walk in the direction of it. How many of us know we want something else, but we tell ourselves, I'll do it in 5 years after I retire? We're no longer in a place where that is a luxury for us. So essentially, I mean, the beautiful part about this is it's like when you really see what we're headed towards, it becomes, all right, there's no time like the present. And so we start to actually take action. I mean, radical action, not just talking about it, not just listening to radio shows where people tell us to take action. I mean, actual action, which requires a great amount of risk. Because
It
if we
does.
don't take that action before the rat cage is shattered, the rat cage will be shattered.
And because it's all programmed too, then when it does, rat cage does shatter, they already have a rebooting system up that's going to be even worse than where we are today.
10
So
times worse, because this is the
yeah,
strategy that cults take. And see, this is one of the reasons that it's really beneficial for me to be out in the world, having been through the cult abuse that I was in.
yeah. What do you
Our
got to
government
lose?
is no
Yeah,
different than a cult. So
yeah,
what they do, their methodology is to create a collapse and then come in as the savior, and everyone embraces the damn thing.
absolutely. And we're getting, it's a big sting operation getting set up for that right now. But
Oh my
wouldn't
God.
then I know,
If
I
most
know.
people knew.
I know, but because those drones, there's a movie out on with the drones. They use the drones against Afghanistan, and how they just it was a horrible movie, and what these poor Americans had to do, and had to make the decisions because they're it's like being a freaking video game, and you're pushing buttons, and you see the instructions, but it's easy to disconnect because you're not there, right?
Right.
But those drone situations are going to be happening right here. We're living in a post-constitutional law. We had this guy, Kevin, not had this guy, but I listened to Kevin Shipp was on one of our, yeah, I watched one of his videos. I'm trying to get him on the show. He's a ex-CIA director who talks about how you got to stand up. If you don't stand up now, it's going to be too late. You say, but he's saying it more from an extrasensual perspective. He's saying it from a CIA. Hey, I know what the hell's going on. It's like, what's going on in this matrix here? He's like a Mr. Smith who became a whistleblower, right?
Yep.
And so it is, and it needs a shift. And I hate it because you know what? I have such a great life. I have beautiful children. I have beautiful friends. I have a beautiful place. I'm doing something I really enjoy doing, and it's like and I don't want to see my kids, my grandkids, being enslaved in this type of situation. If I don't mind risking my life to speak up at this point, and you are much more inspiration for me now because I'm hearing this from you, and everyone has, you don't know that you really understand that how people interact and touch with each other and how they have impact on each other to perhaps maybe down the line when you realize somebody got into your head or whatever. But I do, and it's a confirmation for me to continue what I'm doing, and I'm sure you don't need that. You know exactly what you need to be doing. But I just think people are going to have to, like you said, wake up now. To me, yeah, you have a lot of these folks have this great idea, this intentional, park I want to create. But when you have the Agenda 21 who's countering it every step of the way, nobody looks at what these operations are doing. I think we need to look at what these people are doing and
Well,
then say, okay,
yeah, we do. We need to become well aware of it. And not just that, we have to become aware of the fear dynamics that are involved there. Because the majority of people who know these things are happening, but yet sort of just decide they sort of stay underneath, right? I'm just going to stay
yeah,
underneath, not poke my head above the crowd because I'll
yeah,
get shot if I do that. That
yeah,
type of energy, though understandable, we really have to have a come to Jesus moment. Let's just call it that. Because the
yeah,
reality is like, as a mother, I'm just going to speak personally, and you can apply this to yourselves. As a mother, I mean, I would love to be with my son all the time. I would love to be a stay-at-home mom who does that kind of a thing and, can really support him more than that. I would love to be the kind of person who knew I was going to be around my son when he's, 40 and 50 and 60 years old because I feel like I'm going to live that long. But I had to really have a moment when I realized what I was advocating for here in the world. And you said it right when we got on. I thought it was highly ironic. You're like, why are you killing all of our alternative doctors? We are in a time where fear and, frankly, modalities of violence are the motivation that the government is giving for people to stay silent. So I had to make a real decision for myself. My decision was, am I going to prioritize my short-term goal or my long-term goal? My short-term goal being to be able to spend as much time with my son as possible in this loving space where he was safe and I was safe. My long-term goal being to create a kind of world that I would want him to live into. So basically, I had to prioritize, and many of us are going to be in this position where we have to, the long-term goal over the short-term goal. If I play into the system so as to keep myself safe right now, I am setting up a world for my children that I don't want them to live into. So I am taking these risks, a lot of the risks, like I am being in this public position that I am today. It's worth it by virtue of the fact that I don't want him to live into the way the world is being set up right now.
no, my kids are fully aware too what's going on, and I feel, to me it's a mix of her guilt because I just sense what's going to be happening if we don't somehow have a massive wake up across the board. You know, this 10% rule, I don't know if that's a co-op thing or if that's really true. 10% people wake up, you could shift things, but I think we need probably 30, 40, 50% people at this point. I don't know what it, but no, I feel guilt sometimes, like, you know, my sons, I'm like, you know, I don't want to like ruin your life experience at college, or ruin, you know, where you're just thinking about doom and gloom, and you have to risk your lives, because I don't want to steal their innocence. You know, it's another way of stealing their innocence. It's like a fine line to walk on. And
It's not.
go ahead.
It's not
All
because
right.
this is the thing, and I
Yeah.
love this. So this, just listen. If nothing else, just
Hey,
listen to this. You
can
ready?
you hang on a little longer than normal? Because
Yeah, I can.
okay,
But
okay, good.
so this is what I want you to get. You do not have to steal your children's innocence. We have this concept that children do not have the capacity to deal with what is, but they do. How do you know this? Because of how adaptable children are. If you raise a child in a super abusive relationship, they accept that as normal. Children have the capacity to deal with much more than we give them. We are projecting on our children. That's why, for example, when I raised my son, I never gave him these like harebrained ideas about what birth was like. I actually showed him, you know, this is what birth is like. I'm not going to tell you a story about a cabbage patch or some other stupid thing. They have the capacity to deal with the reality of how life is because we have not given them painful meaning for it yet. So what we have to understand is that A, we're creating this fear and then projecting it onto them that they're going to have it towards the world. We're much more prepared for this than we thought. That's number one. Number two is that they're not going to create this massive change in society by looking at the doom and gloom scenarios and all of that crap. What they're going to create the new reality out of is their joy. So what we need to be doing as parents is saying, you know what? Stop listening to all this fear crap that everybody is stuffing down your throat about what the consequence of not going to college is, about the consequence of not vaccinating is, about all these consequences. Just quit living according to consequences. Start following what makes you feel good, and it doesn't matter what the risk is. It doesn't matter. When we create a society full of people who are doing that, I cannot tell you what this place will look like. Like,
It'll
you will
shift.
not even imagine.
It'll shift overnight.
Oh yeah, and what are we going to look at? We're not looking at people who are living in fear. We're looking at these children who are growing to an adults, but as adults, they're going to be doing what they love. These are not people who are in a 9-to-5 job that makes them miserable. These are people who are like, I'm doing this because it's my passion. So the rest of it isn't going to matter. The world essentially is going to line up with that, what they're focused on, what they're living into.
So it's walking into that fear and saying, you know what, I understand how dangerous, because it is dangerous. You're dealing with serious CIA operatives who have been brainwashed, or who are just
Yep.
following orders, or whatever the case may be. I mean, if in a post-constitutional world where they're knocking off good, beautiful, healing, holistic Dr. Gonzalez, Bradstreet, I mean, go down the whole list, you know, to cover up what they're doing with vaccines. And I don't want to get into all that, but, you know, but I mean, but if they're willing to do that,
Yeah.
and God, the Clinton thing, and they're knocking off all these people, and every president does it. But I mean, it's just, if they're willing to do that, and how can we close our eyes to that? We need to be uniting and walking to everybody's house. When somebody shows up, you walk. Everyone walks out of the house. We had Tony Muhammad, Minister Tony Muhammad on. He's like, you know, you white folk, man, you got to, you know, you don't be scared when they start cops coming. You got to stand strong. You got to, you know, you got to be, be able to group up and not be worried about that sense, because that's the fear that we got to face again, or face. You know, but my thing is, what do you recommend for people out there who are at that point, who are really realizing, but they're kind of, I don't want to deal with it because it's just too scary? How do you?
I
What
want them
what
to
tool can you
sit
give
down
them?
and think about the long-term implications. Most people don't do that. Like I'm saying, most people on the
7
planet
days
today are
Super Bowl.
playing a
What's
short
on? What?
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like we don't even need to feed them. I mean, you can do it because you got on one of these radio shows, but we don't even need to feed them with it. I just want them to be conscious enough to sit down in meditation and think about this. If I don't stand up, what is the long-term implications over generations of that? What does it actually look like? And when they sit there and actually do that self-referencing about that, they might come around because they'll realize that it basically gives you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and that's about it.
Your children will be used for sexual toys and slaves, and be living basically the Hunger Games.
Well,
That's
yeah,
what,
it's
you know. If you want you want to live the Hunger Games situation, then, you know, continue on, you know, and like this Kevin Ship that guy said this, yeah, because the days of worrying about what your granite tile is on your kitchen is over with, man.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Right, right.
You know?
What color you're going to paint your
What
walls.
color you're going to
Well,
paint
it's
your walls, you know,
interesting.
that, you
Yeah,
know,
because
forget that. It's done. We need to now, everyone unite, get together and start realizing that we need to unplug and these power. And I was just hoping that, I mean, how far gone? I mean, you've been in the occult. How far gone are these guys? You know, these brokers who are they have their own satanic occult. And I don't want to get to the alien aspect of it right now and lose half the listeners. But how far gone are Luciferian, you know, hypnotized guys now? Where then they have all the money and they got all the power, and then they got, you know, Lucifer or whatever you want to call it. You know, how far gone are they? Can they be reached? I mean, in your opinion.
These people are as far gone as our capacity to create connection is the answer. The undoing of a programmed system in a human being relies entirely on a person's capacity to feel connection again. And so I mean, I know this personally because I was programming people when I
Yeah.
was in my cult group, age 13 to 19. That was what my role was. And so I can tell you that if you can actually create authentic connection, not just the idea of belonging, which is what these groups and organizations fill into people, then the system starts to break down. Because a programmed system inside a human being rests upon a principle that's called the principle program. It's one of 12 steps in a 12-step programming system. And the majority of the time, that primary program is isolation. And that's why there's so much competition in cult groups and in the government, because it sets up this dynamic where I can't trust anyone, I can't be close to anybody, I can't show them me, they can't show me them. And that actually reinforces each individual program in the spectrum. So my answer is they are as gone as they are going to be isolated. But here's something that I wanted to add.
Sure.
When it comes to our children, I'm going to give the parents out there a very, very simple practice. It goes like this. Whenever your kid asks you a question, you answer them honestly. You can tailor that question for their age, but you need to answer them honestly every single time. And then what you do is you give them the idea that they have some hand in changing it. So here's an example. Driving in the car the other day, my son says, I don't really like school, even though he goes to, like, you know, one of the most alternative schools you could possibly imagine. I go, oh, why don't you like school? We started engaging in this conversation. He said what he would like to have be different. I did not tell him, too bad you have to go to school. That's the way it is. I know it sucks. What I told him was, you know, mommy doesn't like it too, and I'm working to change it right now. But you know what would be really awesome is if when you grow up, you could grow up to change that. And so he started brainstorming about what he would rather see instead. It imbues our children with the idea that they actually have the capacity to change something. It is the opposite of this rat in a cage philosophy. It's the opposite of what these organizations feed you, which is the idea that no matter what, your food supply is going to be cut off if you don't feed into the system.
Yeah.
End of story. So we have to get these young people to be expanding their mind to what might be possible instead. That's where these amazing revolutions are going to come from.
You know, and I would add to that, 'cause that was brilliant, by the way. I would add to that, there's no death. There's no death. Even Daniel Brinkley said
Right.
you go through a life review and you realize all the people you hurt and you feel their emotional pain. You know, I guess that was his experience. I don't know if it's everybody's experience, but you feel everybody's emotional pain as whoever you hurt. You know, deliberately hurting, not just, you know, defending yourself. And then he had a chance to come back, and, you know, he's this little badass angel, but but I love that man. But there's no death. It's all we just transition to something else. So if we could intellectually get past the point of we really don't die, even if we have a horrible death, whatever it may be, and we're like Obi-Wan Kenobi. We're going to be coming back better than ever before. I think that will give some people some relief to take that inspired action. And Teal, I know we're coming to a close here in a little bit, but what do you like? I know what you're doing for inspired action. Let's talk about let's talk about your foundation right now. I think that's a big piece of what you're doing. The Headway Foundation.
Yeah, well, the Headway Foundation wants to take on everything. So, I mean, I want to take on
Woo!
the food
Go get it, girl.
industry. I want to take on the medical industry. I want to take on justice reform.
Big
I want to
pharma,
take on
man.
all of this.
Yeah, yeah.
However,
You can only
recently,
do so much.
given what I've been seeing in the universe, what I have seen is the most critical thing for us to do right now is intentional community. So what I have dedicated all of my time to right now, besides teaching this emotional process that I created called the completion process, which helps us essentially get rid of the wounds that are creating the world the way it is to set up intentional communities. And this is where most of my focus is going. We need to figure out sustainability. We need to figure out how to collect people together, because the single family household is absolutely a tool of these governments you've been talking
Sure.
about.
Yep.
The more we can be isolated and the more dependent we are on the system instead of each other, the more control these people have. So basically, creating these intentional communities in a way where they are sustainable long term, in alignment with the environment that they are created in, is where we need to be going right now. So most of my focus and attention over the next X amount of years until I get another message is going to be dedicated towards that.
After the show or sometime we need to talk, because I that's exactly kind of where my mindset is too, and what we're actually doing. So with the United Intentions Foundation. So, but outside of that, but yeah, I think you're right. It now needs to get our strength is in communities and intentional communities. That's where our strength is, and it's going to take people being vulnerable, people willing to be their authentic self, and stop worrying about this. And first they have to do is unplug them. And
Yeah.
what is your best way have you seen of unplugging people from the matrix? I'm not going to explain to anybody because most people know what that is anyway.
Really? My best way of unplugging people from the matrix is getting them to deal with their own fear. Fear is the umbilical cord that is keeping
Yeah.
people in the system. So if you address people's fear, that's what does it.
Gotcha.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, so you got that in your synchronicity workshops. What are you doing with that? Is that are you bringing in these? Are you kind of combining the intentional workshops with the synchronicity workshops, or is that just totally a separate medium?
Well, I mean, they kind of feed into one another, because what you'll notice about my demographic is quite interesting. I have a lot of youth that are following my material and that show up at these workshops, and
Millennials.
that's a hodgepodge. The majority of my demographic is actually between age 16 and 30. So I
No
have got a
kidding.
lot of youth.
Wow,
And
that's good.
what I'm creating community in that group, hoping then, and also using my, let's say, skills to inspire them to create these kind of communities. So you do that by setting up these real intense connections between people, so that then they become lonely enough in their life that they become motivated to actually get together and create these types of structures. And I'm going to help them, of course, with how to do that, ways to deal with conflict resolution and stuff like that. But these synchronization workshops is more my way to go wake up the world. So I'll go to a city, host this big workshop. It's a full day of like super intense emotional and mental work of freedom. And then I'll go to another city. And that's kind of like planting the seed. Every time I go somewhere, plant. The reason they nicknamed me the catalyst is because I have this capacity to basically enter into somebody's life and make it so that they can never go back to the life they lived.
Yeah. You give them the red pill with no choice of the blue pill.
Oh, 100%. I am absolutely the red pill. I'm the red pill. So basically,
You're the
once
red pill.
the red pill, they're like, oh, I need to make a change, and so they do.
You ever come to points in your life where you like, maybe I should take the blue pill?
She is the red pill. She has no option.
Let me see what a nice steak tastes like, But no, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right on that, Teal. And I think, and plus your book, Shadows Before the Dawn, that was basically, if you want to really know what she went through, buy the book, Shadows Before the Dawn. That's basically
It's an
her
amazing
experience,
read.
her experience, what she experienced. And man, I'll tell you what, this interview, Teal, went a totally different way. I mean, I have 1,000 of the questions, which we're not going to get to, but I honestly don't care about them because they're stupid compared to what we just talked about. So I'm just so glad. I'm so glad you are the Marines, or we got the Marines in the house.
I know. And I
Yeah.
just want to say what an honor it is to hear your voice and see you live and be able
Yeah.
to talk to you, because when I heard your interview, I just knew, I was like, I'm going to meet this woman one day.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Remember that?
I just knew. It's just you hear somebody and you hear
I'm
their story.
I'm manifesting things quick these
He
days.
is, man. Yeah.
tell you
So,
what.
but it was such an honor to have this conversation.
Yes,
with
Teal,
you.
thank you so much. I really appreciate, and tell everybody thank you too, what everybody's done, Brad and everyone. So have a great day and keep up the fight. And I'm sure we'll talk soon. I got a lot to share. All right.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.